Hello Internet, and welcome to Ramblings of a Madman. I'm Alex, and I'm joined by Sean and Stuart for a shallow and probably uninformed dive into unexplained mysteries, conspiracy theories, and the supernatural. We're back for episode 8, I think we're up to now. We're getting up there.
It's episode 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got episode 7 in my notes, but I'm thinking, yeah, it is episode 8.
Yeah, we're getting up there, almost double digits.
Exciting.
Very exciting. So how are you today, Stuart?
I'm extremely well, thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad myself. A little phlegmy, but it's not the end of the world. And Sean, are you okay?
Yeah, I no longer have my chest infection, so by default I'm pretty good. Let's see if I can get through an entire episode without coughing.
Yeah, the intention is to not cough up your lungs this time.
Yeah, and then miss the pause button, or the mute button, and then ruin the entire recording again.
It's fine. It's just how it
We've got a
goes.
good editor, right?
Well, he thinks he knows what he's doing. Got a Googling. Right, so today, I don't know what we're doing because Sean refuses to tell me. I asked him, but he was like, nope, it's going to be a surprise.
Wow. Like a bit of excitement in our lives, don't we? You know.
No, I don't like any excitement at all.
Well, it's a mystery. The whole channel is based around mysteries, all right?
Yeah, but I like to know what the mystery is before we start.
Nah, true. It's mostly because I couldn't really decide till a few days ago. So that's why I've decided to keep it quiet.
I reckon it's all a conspiracy. He really knows what it is.
So, let's get into it then.
Yep.
Right. My subject today, while I'm the Madman, is Atlantis.
Ooh.
Nice.
And the different theories on where it's located. As we've done with previous episodes, which I kind of agree with, I kind of narrowed it down. Like the Jack the Ripper one, it was long enough, and we only stuck to a couple of theories. There's so much speculation and justified theories of where Atlantis could have been. But before we go into any of that, I just want to go into like the history of Atlantis and why we even think it's a thing. So what do you guys know about Atlantis? Because most of it's quite self-explanatory, but I want to know your level.
What I find interesting about the concept of Atlantis is that the mention of underwater cities sort of comes up in a lot of cultures all around the world throughout time, if I'm not being mistaken.
No, yeah. I can't think of any examples. But
I think it might be briefly mentioned in the Bible. It might be briefly mentioned by the Egyptians. Citation needed.
I think, again, citation needed. I'm sure somewhere I've seen it is related. It
the
is
Greeks mention it.
Yeah, I was going to say the Greeks.
The Greeks mention it quite a lot because it's closely associated with Poseidon, and I'll get into that.
Yes.
The god of the sea.
Yeah.
But it gives more credence to it actually existing, the fact that it spanned such a long generation of time on Earth.
Yeah.
Because all these cultures had a long amount of time between them, and they probably didn't interact with each other. So whether that's them picking up stories from previous cultures and spreading them and continuing them, or whether it's actually true and they're just independently talking about the same thing.
Yeah. Again, we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
So, long story short, Poseidon got annoyed with the city of Atlantis and ordered a giant squid to suck it into the water.
Giant squid!
Wait, is this
That was a
an
lie.
actual thing? No? Damn it.
No, that was a joke. I just had
Giant
to get
squid! It's always
Giant
the giant
squid.
squid. If in doubt, make wild accusations about giant squids.
I thought we escaped it. We didn't mention it last episode.
Didn't we?
I don't think so, no.
Did we not?
You'll have to go back and edit it. Just
Yeah.
Edit it in myself.
yeah.
Call the little thing.
Right, okay, so let's go from the start then. So the main reason we know about it is because of the Greek philosopher Plato. He talked about it in 2 of his dialogues. Excuse me for butchering the pronunciations, but I did look it up before. I think it's the Timaeus and the Cretius, those 2 books that he wrote.
Okay.
He wrote them around about 360 BC.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically discussed various things, but the whole the idea of Atlantis was discussed. So here's where it gets a bit sketchy. One of the books is called Cretius. Cretius was actually a person, apparently. The story was passed to Cretius from his grandfather, who was conveniently also called Cretius.
Not confusing at all.
Who it was passed on to from his father, Dropides, and it was passed on to him from Solon,
Oh, Greek
who
names are so
is-
cool, aren't they?
Yeah.
Solon, who was an Athenian lawmaker.
Athenian, did you say?
Athenian, yeah.
Athenian,
So,
cool.
from Athens, the Greek capital. Who, here's where it gets sketchier, was passed the story on from an Egyptian sanctuary.
I was right.
Which could have just been anything, really, So that isn't great. A friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. Or my dad's grandfather's best mate's Egyptian sanctuary told me about this story. You know what I mean? It's not...
These are like the sources for our episodes. They're just
exactly,
a bit sketchy.
But we'll look into it. We'll look into it. So in the book, Atlantis was said to be a very advanced civilization. Not necessarily like we discussed with like the Egyptians and the pyramids. I mean, just everything was far more advanced for its time. They had sewage systems and stuff like that. It was just more advanced. I can't think of examples because all the examples have gone out of my head, but you know what I mean.
Okay, good job.
A bit like how the ancient Romans did.
Yeah, they just pioneered a lot of the, amazing architecture.
And it's just like infrastructure.
They built roads, infrastructure. They probably built boats. There was a lot of trade, and it was quite a well-established civilization, which was far advanced for its time.
Sure.
But then it says it was swallowed by the sea 9,200 years before Plato wrote about it. So around about 11,000 years ago.
Okay, so it wasn't him, it was not autobiographical.
No. I think what was specified is that Plato had writings or books from Solon, and it was passed on, and he basically published it himself in 360 BC, and probably paraphrased and shit like that. So there's a few different things that he says about Atlantis, which obviously will be relevant when we're talking about the theories and the locations. Mm-hmm. He said it's located in the Atlantic Pelagos, which I think is the Atlantic Sea.
Pelagos.
Pelagos. Pelagos. Yeah, I don't know how to...
Isn't that islands or something?
Yeah.
Pelagos.
Oh, yeah.
Archipelagos are a series of islands.
Because, like, the Galapagos is a Pelagos of go. That's probably not true.
It's Galap, but it doesn't matter. Basically,
Pelagos is a diving watch. So thanks for that, Google. Very useful.
Right, it doesn't matter, but basically, it's in the Atlantic Sea.
Okay.
Which it's the Atlantic Ocean, not the sea, but it specifies Atlantic Sea.
Wait, was it in the Atlantic Ocean originally before it was swallowed by the ocean?
We'll get to that.
Oh, we're not going lost here, are we, with the island transports?
So obviously the writing and stuff like that is not 100% clear. Different names could have been used for different bodies of water, different land masses, stuff like that. So a lot of people interpret it as the Mediterranean Sea, just around Athens and stuff like that. Because what it specifies is that Atlantis is located in front of the Pillars of Hercules, which are presumed to be
in Greece.
No, Gibraltar.
Gibraltar.
So where, correct me if I'm wrong, I have looked it up, it's where Spain meets Morocco.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
Slightly above Africa.
Yeah, it's like the gate, almost, the landmass that is in between the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, that's what people presume he means when he says the Pillar of Hercules, but there's different speculation to say it could be anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or how closely associated it is and stuff like that.
Yeah, because famously Hercules was associated with Gibraltar in all of the stories.
Was he?
No, not at all.
Oh, wow. Hook, line, and sinker.
Hook, line, sinker. Ouch.
Correct.
Okay, so another important part is that the city was made, like, maybe if you looked at it from a top-down view, it was like concentric circles of alternating land and water.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So, like in the center, there was a landmass, then a circle of water around that, then a circle of land around that, then a circle of water, then a circle of land.
How many of these were there in total?
For the rings, so it was, I think it was 2 or 3 bodies of water.
They kind of had it coming then. They were asking to be flooded.
Well, you could say the same for Venice, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like a floating city, but it wasn't necessarily a floating city from how he described it. It was literally like land mass, either man-made or not.
Oh, I was about to ask whether they were man-made or natural.
Well, we don't know.
Yeah.
It's not specified. Anyway, one of the other things is that he specifies a lot of the rocks in the area were both red and black and white. Doesn't specify what kind of rocks they were. Sorry, Alex.
Damn it.
But it specifies red, black, and white.
I'm not sure they would have known what rocks they were. I'm not sure how sophisticated geology was back in 360 BC.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if, though, you can make assumptions like red could be clay.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Black for a lot of the volcanic.
Yeah, like the obsidian
Basalt,
stuff.
probably.
There's a lot of, specifically in Greece, there's lots of like...
There's a lot of white rock as well.
Quote-unquote obsidian islands, which are covered in volcanic black rock in Greece.
Another thing is that he says that it's closely associated with elephants for some reason.
Okay.
Maybe suggesting its proximity to Africa?
Well, maybe. But he does specify that they have elephants around there, either as workers or just there's elephants around there. So
the only inhabitants are elephants.
As I'll talk about later, there is actually some surprising places that have fossilized remains of elephants that you wouldn't expect in these places these days.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we'll look into that. One of the really interesting things that I wanted to stick in was a bit I found on the fact that Nazis actually went looking for it. And I haven't gone into the same amount of detail of the source that I found, but I cannot remember right now the name of the... I don't know if he was SS in the Nazis, or if he was just a high-ranking officer, but he theorized that the Aryan race, who were obviously what the Nazis wanted to be, or, they wanted to create their empire in their image and blah, blah, blah. They believed the Aryan race was actually descendants from Atlanteans.
Yeah.
But
there's lots
what
of
proof he has of that is...
We could do a whole episode on like Nazi stuff, because there's lots of stories where they're like looking for ancient technology and power and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of crazy. All the pies they got their fingers into.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I had no idea. And they actually did big expeditions, like around the world, looking for this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Any edge they could find in the war.
Exactly, it's crazy. But also, I don't think that was war-related as such. I think it was more just trying to find, either proof or just a way to kind of idolize them. Because they believe that this particular Nazi believed that the Aryan race was descendant from Atlanteans, which I thought was quite interesting. Because it just caught me off guard. I was like, what the hell? The Nazis, really?
Atlantis,
they're everywhere.
And then strong racism goes hand in hand.
Right, should we go into some of the theories and where it could be located then?
Yeah,
let's go.
I have missed out quite a few of maybe the important ones. Not necessarily important ones, but there's a lot with a lot of theories around them.
Yeah.
And I wanted to keep this fairly
skip some
concise.
of the stupid ones.
So, one of my favourite ones, which in my opinion is one of the most backed, if you know what I mean.
Credible.
Yeah, credible. It's fairly recent. When I was researching it, I found it on Wikipedia, stuff like that, and it actually referred back to this one channel. And he basically didn't create the theory. He just gathered a lot of information from different stuff and then put it out there. And it ended up getting like 2.2 million views in such a small amount of time. And it started gathering traction and people started jumping on board and building that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so basically he suggests the city of Atlantis used to be where the Eye of the Sahara is. And you can Google that right now if you want to.
The Eye of the Sahara?
Eye of the Sahara, or the Ricat structure, which is RICHAT structure. And you can see basically that it looks like an eye, because to the north of it you've kind of got like mountains that create like a shadow, or they are darker in general, contrast to the sand. And you can see it's actually either natural or man-made. That's still debatable, but looks like a circle and concentric circles.
I was about to say, it almost looks like the description that you gave of land, water. It has that kind of appearance to it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You can imagine, obviously it's in the middle of the Sahara. To specify, it is in Mauritania, which is basically on the northwest of Africa, on that bit that sticks out. Basically, the theory is that it used to be Atlantis, and for various different reasons, there used to be water there. And if you're looking at the picture, the southwest of that almost looks like water could have gone through past the mountains. And they're saying that is the inlet of water that linked it to the sea.
Okay.
Okay?
Oh, this is so cool.
Yeah, regardless of the Atlantis thing, that's really cool.
I'm just reading the geology of it.
Yeah.
The geology fits as well. You've got a load of different extrusive igneous rocks, which could be white in colour, such as rhyolite. You've got resistant layers of quartzite, which could also be white. You've got some red rocks. I think they're breccias, maybe, something like that. I'm actually going to read about this after the book, because I want to know how this is formed. It's really cool.
Yeah, so I'll skip ahead to how people believe it's formed, regardless of the Atlantis thing. Some believe it as an impact site of a meteor, but there's no evidence of a crater.
Okay,
You imagine a crater, it's just too flat. It's almost like a nipple. It's not like a...
Yeah, because I was looking at the picture and I thought, the picture that I'm looking at here makes it look as if the middle is actually sunken, almost like a quarry, the way it's like a step down kind of a layer. But I think that's kind of like my mind playing tricks on me, because I want to see that.
Because you want to see it, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it does look like there is actually a middle bit.
Yeah, the meteor kind of theory, I was going to say that, has it been created by an impact, or was there something there before?
So one of the other theories on how it was kind of developed is that it is kind of, and forgive me, Alex, I know I'm going to butcher all of this theory, but the second theory is that it was formed because it was kind of like a volcano, but it didn't fully erupt. So because apparently it's quite near to the fault line. I'm not 100% sure on that. But, because of like plate shifting and stuff like that, it got forced through that bit in particular, but didn't fully erupt. And it just kind of created like a ripple effect over time, because it was a constant pushing of pressure and it kind of rippled out, if you know what I mean. That's the way it was kind of my lack of geology and stuff like that. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah, so from my
to me.
very quick, just skim over the description, it's a elliptical dome sort of structure with the strata dipping outwards at 10 to 20 degrees. So it's basically it's an A shape, if you think of it like that. And it's formed by a load of magma getting trapped on the surface and then pushing the ground level upwards, because you've injected a load of new material into all the cracks in the bedrock. Yeah. And this is shown by a load of different intrusive igneous rocks, such as gabbro dikes, which are basically just cooled magma in a long crack, and these can be really big. For example, some of these are 50 meters in width, and they're about 8 kilometers long.
Okay.
I don't know what anything of you just said, but
it sounded
I don't
impressive.
know what I just said either, because I just flubbed everything I just said.
And you get the layering, sort of the circular layering structures from differential erosion, because the different rock types will have different hardnesses, and some will erode faster than others. And then you'll get the rock types that are more resistant showing up at the surface, and the ones which aren't will get eroded faster. And then you'll get this circular structure from above.
Would that not make the topography, though, really uneven, rather than it looking flat?
Possibly. Like, it won't be a perfect dome shape.
Point out as well, a lot of people didn't even know this existed until we photographed it from space, because it's about 23 kilometers in diameter.
Yeah, it's really big.
It's huge.
You wouldn't notice it when you're standing on it.
No.
He didn't go walk into it and go, this is
exactly.
Yeah, because the layers are so wide that when you're standing on one layer, that's the only layer you'd see.
Okay,
you do see like lines of, maybe you see like, it looks like what looks like mountains, but yeah. So in terms of the size, one of the things that's really relevant is that Plato said it was about, I think it was about 120 something stada, which was a measurement they used back then, I guess. Okay. And when you convert that into it, it's about 23 kilometers.
Yeah.
So it matches almost perfectly to the size of the area that the city would have covered.
Yeah.
Which is, again, more coincidence. And this is why I think it most closely matches, by coincidence or not, the description that Plato gave of Atlantis.
So this is the location, isn't it? But I guess we're traditionally thinking of. Oh, then again, I think part of the problem is that, as we said before, we assume that Atlantis is this underwater city, but we're thinking of it, I guess, being pre-underwater.
Yeah, and it might have rose. So I'll skip ahead again. There's a theory that says that land masses can rise over time.
They do.
They do, right?
Yeah, that's how you get
what
mountains.
it's saying is that, like, the continent as a whole, and that's why the intake of water, on the southeast part of the eye, and you can actually see on some of the pictures that there is, even now, the sand that's left almost looks like it could have been a flow, some kind of fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because sand is arguably fluid because on mass, it has the ability to flow, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it has energy put to it. So with the land potentially being lower, it also lines up to the fact that around 17,000 BC to 10,000 BC, it's speculated, or it's regularly accepted by scientists, that the water levels used to be 100 to 300 foot lower. So basically what I'm trying to say is that over that time period, it is possible it could have been the perfect sea level, and the sea level could have been at the perfect level, so that the water could have been just covering, or like the tide or whatever could have been just covering the Ricat structure, if you know what I mean.
So do you know why the water levels were lower during this time?
No.
Because the Ice Age. All the water was trapped in the north, in the large glaciers, so the sea level was lower overall.
Okay.
So would that have affected other structures? So we're saying that we're talking about this structure being, it's in the Sahara. Did we say it was, sorry, I forgot whether or not, did we say it was near the ocean?
If you look at it on a map, it's actually kind of close, yeah.
So it would have been further away.
It could have been closer.
But if the water level was lower, surely it would have been arguably further away.
Yeah, but the land mass also could have been lower because...
Oh, I guess they've both risen together.
If you look right now, the actual... what's the word? Is it the altitude?
Yeah.
Is about 1,200 meters. So it's actually quite high above sea level. But what all the different theories are trying to say around this one is basically saying that the actual land mass, that area, that part of the continent, could have been lower.
I don't think the time scale is an issue, because it takes a very long time for land masses to rise and fall, and it wouldn't have.
Okay.
There wouldn't be much difference in topography between now and what was it, 1,000 BC, something like that.
10,000 BC, wasn't it?
10,000 BC.
Yeah. So, what is the question? Are you on about the water levels, or when Atlantis was said to be around?
When Atlantis was said to be around, because you said that.
Okay, so around 11,000.
It got flooded because the landmass fell, right? That's what you're saying? Or because the water levels rose?
No. So what Plato said is because it was swallowed by the sea.
Right, okay, so the water levels rose.
Exactly what happened scientifically.
Mm-hmm.
But swallowed by the sea, as we'll discuss later, could be interpreted in a few different ways.
Yeah, I think it's more likely to interpret it as the water level rising as a result of the Ice Age ending.
Mm-hmm.
I have a better theory for why it flooded.
Mm.
I reckon there was a dam that was created by hundreds of thousands of beavers, and it burst its bank, and it flooded the entirety of Africa.
I call bullshit.
The extinct Grecian beaver.
Yeah.
Or maybe the treants said, unleash the river.
Oh, it was the Ents.
The Ents, sorry.
It took them a very long time to do it, but they got to it eventually. But then they cut it out of the actual film.
Yeah. So, serious, the dates coincide with the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe.
Ah, yes, I know this well.
Which, go on then.
I've never heard of it.
Damn it, again. It was basically, I'm guessing because of the Ice Age, or because like the comet hit to end the Ice Age. Is that correct? Or the one that killed the dinosaurs potentially?
No, that was 65 million years ago.
But it could have been a comet, or basically when the Ice Age ended, But it's saying that it happened in such a drastic way, like a fast way, that it caused the water to rise really quickly.
I think the most recent ice age ended just because of environmental reasons.
Okay, so it could have happened slowly then, but maybe it just happened very quickly after it reached a certain point. I'm not 100% sure, but basically it's saying that link is how the city got flooded. And then maybe the water levels dropped again, or the landmass rose. When it's saying about the landmass rising, obviously it's speculation, because there are apparently theories, like with Antarctica, that are basically saying that Antarctica is rising.
Okay. I wonder whether or not we're kind of talking about if the land mass is at different heights, whether or not there would have been different rivers and things like that as well.
Yeah, so this theory kind of says that the Nile used to run the length of Africa, like way longer than it is now.
Yeah. Part of the reason that I was wondering more about the river is because you can imagine that there will be... So the comparison that I'm making is that if you think about like Everest, obviously it's an enormous mountain that has a glacier or whatever that causes water to flow down it, which flows into the Danube, maybe? Alex will probably correct me on that.
I don't know.
Fine.
At least he didn't lie this time.
If the same thing was able to happen in a much different topographical climate, whether or not there might have been rivers that were leading to the formation of like different rock formations. How much of that rock formation is sediment? Did you manage to see that, Alex?
Right, so the problem with that question is that these rocks are Ordovician, which is very old, which means that they wouldn't have been formed by rivers around that time period.
Okay.
So this structure is very old, it's Ordovician, so you have to assume this structure was there already and they built a city on it, because I can't quite remember how old Ordovician is, but it's almost 500 million years old, Ordovician.
Oh, wow. Wait, so 500 million years old, and when was the meteor that killed the dinosaurs again?
65. Well, 66.7, technically.
It definitely hit that exact spot.
I think there would be a bigger crater.
It bounced off.
The meteor which killed the dinosaurs hit Mexico.
Oh.
It's called the Chihuahua crater, I believe.
Is it hell?
Hang on, citation needed.
Chupacabra crater, maybe. That sounds a bit more...
Sounds more sinister.
Yeah, ominous.
In my head, I always think of the meteor that hit the Earth when the dinosaurs were killed as the one that created the moon, but that was obviously at a different time period. Chihuahua is how you spell Chihuahua, by the way, if you're looking for the phrasing.
Chihuahua.
Chihuahua.
Sorry, it's called the Chicxulub crater, and it's in...
Wow, you couldn't have got that any more wrong.
It's in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. It's fine, I'll cut it out, and I'll look like a genius.
No, that was a mistake.
So, basically, the mountains to the north, it was said that they were beautiful. If you actually look at the Rickard structure pictures, the mountains to the north that are kind of like the eyebrow, or whatever you want to call it, if you look really closely, there's actually evidence of rivers, or previous rivers, with like the cracks in between them. So it could be argued that they would have looked really beautiful because of the rivers running down them.
Yeah.
But one thing that's also quite interesting is that it's Africa, so there's proof of elephants, but they have actually found fossilized remains of elephants nearby.
That's madness.
Another thing that's quite interesting is that Plato said that there was a constant stream in the center bit. There was a stream for fresh water and salt water. So civilization, one of the best ways that it develops is, like, you can't usually have any kind of civilization without water, especially fresh water, right?
Yeah.
So he's saying that one of the reasons it was able to prosper is because of this pure water source, or fresh water source, rather. And it has been shown that there is actually a well at the center of the Rickard structure that supplies fresh water.
And that's how it flooded. Someone put the plug in.
Yeah. So another thing as well is about the Pillars of Hercules. Yeah. So it doesn't always specify exactly, like, it's speculation that the Pillars of Hercules is the Strait of Gibraltar.
Yeah.
So what it's saying is that the Rock of Gibraltar, which I think is on the southern side of it, could have been one of the pillars, and then another mountain just found in another northern part of Africa could have been the second pillar. If you know what I mean? So that's kind of more speculation, basically.
Interestingly, if you actually go on Google Maps and type in the Pillars of Gibraltar, not only is it the name of a restaurant...
Hercules.
Pillars of Hercules, sorry. Not only is it a restaurant in Spain, but it's also actually, it comes up as Gibraltar.
Yeah, because that's...
On a slightly unusual
presumed
note,
to be there.
Yeah, on a slightly unusual note, ever so slightly north of a Jewish cemetery, which I wonder if why the Nazis wanted it. Oh, no, wait, that was a different structure that the Nazis wanted, wasn't it?
I have no idea. So what do you think of that, basically? Any questions? Because that's all that I've got in my notes, but there was a lot more in the videos I watched and the different bits of research that I did.
I kind of like it as a location.
Yeah, it matches the description given by the shaky...
By Plato, yeah.
Shaky source of Plato quite well from above. It seems to be about the right size. It has this concentric ring structure to it. It's possibly in the right sort of location, like North Africa. I'm not sure how far Greek culture expanded out of Greece.
So in that respect, citation needed, Plato did a lot of travelling.
Yeah.
And he did actually go quite far, apparently. So one of these places could have been Atlantis. He obviously never went to Atlantis, but in terms of Solon, the guy who passed it on, he obviously went to a Egyptian sanctuary. So he was able to go to Egypt. And I'm guessing Egypt ruled a lot more than just what Egypt is now.
Yeah.
So he could have gone to a few different places.
Yeah, they did. They took over most of North Africa.
Like the Egyptians might have known about Atlantis and passed it on or whatever. So even though it's got a lot of Greek mythology behind it, it's only because the Greeks found out about it and they presumed, obviously, it's a sea city. Specifically as well, it was said that Poseidon's son, Atlas, I think it was.
Guy who carried the world on his back?
No, that's what I was thinking. So Atlantis apparently means City of Atlas, but he was the first king of Atlantis, was Atlas, right?
Oh, right, okay.
So I'm not 100% sure on the actual specifics of it.
Yeah, Greek mythology has a loads of different sources as well, so the stories are kind of different between the sources. So it's hard to narrow down a single story for an important Greek figure, such as Atlas. Here's a question about Atlantis, which I just thought about.
In general, or this?
Just in general, about the concept of it. Are they assuming that everyone died when it was flooded, or that they were living under the ocean?
The presumption is that the entire city was destroyed.
Oh, right, okay.
Not that they created a brand new city. And that is, I think, a lot of speculation by the different media and,
Because in like, pop culture...
pop culture
Atlantis
is what the term I was looking for.
It's like covered by a bubble of air, which people can live in.
Yeah, that's not what Plato was saying.
Okay.
It's saying that it was a city, it was an advanced civilization that was destroyed because the sea swallowed it. Right. One thing that I find quite interesting that maybe you've not picked up on is how come there's no proof of civilization?
Yeah, I was about to ask what the archaeology is of this Ricat structure, if there is any.
So, there's barely anything.
Ah, nice.
Because going to Mauritania is highly unadvised.
Is it?
Yes,
is it very
because
dangerous?
Of terrorism. Yes, terrorism, crime, and rape, basically.
Terrorism, crime.
So if like the US has travel advisories and stuff like that, they basically say that it's highly advised you do not go because it's just the police do not have the resources to police anything. So if you go there, it's at your own risk, and they highly advise against it. And if you are an official, a US official, you're advised to, you are not allowed, because if you're under the jurisdiction and stuff like that, you're not allowed to go out of nighttime. You have to travel through daytime. So that's why maybe massive expeditions and archaeological digs and stuff haven't been done, because the area itself is just too dangerous. Right.
So what we need is like a small team of crazy archaeologists, like an Indiana Jones style team.
Just pay the terrorists to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure they've got great archaeology knowledge. Those extremist terrorists. They're very interested in the Ricat structure and its dipping strata. I'm sure, well, that's geology. It's better than archaeology, but...
Okay, so that is one of the bigger theories, and I really wanted to focus on that one because I really like it.
It's cool.
The next one I've got is that Malta is Atlantis.
The entirety of Malta.
Yeah, so the idea being that the island...
Not a very big place,
No,
though,
it's a country, but it's
an island again.
Yeah. So an island that is associated with volcanic eruptions, tsunamis and earthquakes, etc., that could have destroyed the connection to the land, like the mainland, right? So the theory being that, through all of that and different landmass shifting and stuff like that, the idea of the sea swallowing Atlantis in the way that, because obviously the sea levels could have been different, or they could have risen and fallen because of the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe, blah, blah, blah. One of the reasons that people think the theory makes sense is because Atlantis being swallowed by the sea, the interpretation of that could be that it just disappeared because, the land just disappeared and bits of it just sunk. And then they couldn't get back to what is now known as Malta, and they presumed it just sunk into the sea.
Is there any evidence to support that in terms of like local people going from Malta looking in the sea, or the geography?
There is, from what I can tell, there's expeditions all over the place, but Malta's not one of the main focuses. But in terms of civilizations and stuff like that, Malta is proven to have some of the oldest temples in the world, not necessarily related to the pyramids, as we discussed. But in terms of carbon dating, I guess, it has some of the oldest.
The thing is, the Maltese people, the Maltese history, like Malta's got a really, really fascinating history. They've basically got loads of fortresses and, like you said, temples. My sister's been, and she said that, well, she didn't really like it, but at the time, mainly for different reasons, but she said that, like, historically, you could spend as much time there as you would spend if you went to somewhere like Rome or Greece.
So
somewhere in Greece, maybe like
apparently
to
it's been
Athens.
inhabited since 5,900 BC. So very long history.
But as far as we know.
Although that's kind of an interesting kind of theory if you think about it, because we're talking about the fact that somewhere between 17,000 and 10,000 BC, people were living on Atlantis. At some point it flooded, and then suddenly Malta gets inhabited. As a timeline, the migration of people moving away from somewhere that had been flooded or damaged. Obviously, we're talking thousands of years there, but we haven't got anything specific, have you?
True.
So are we assuming that Atlantis was on part of Malta and then that part of it crashed into the sea?
I guess, yeah. Or it was Malta. Because one of the things that was said in Plato's writing is that the first king, either Poseidon or Atlas, I can't 100% remember because I didn't think it was relevant, but he had 10 sons. Either Poseidon did or Atlas did. And those then became...
Probably Poseidon.
Or Atlas, because he was just the first king of Atlantis. But they basically could have had their own cities in Malta.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Interesting point.
Another thing, which is a little bit, but it kind of makes sense. Apparently, they have found fossils of elephants in Malta.
Ooh.
Again, that makes sense. So both of these theories tie in quite well. So regardless of which location you pick. So if we're saying Gibraltar is the gates of Pillars of Hercules, sorry, and there were and that's like the location. So that ties North Africa to the Sahara in like a straight line, doesn't it? But then if Malta used to be connected to mainland Africa rather than Italy, so imagine it going the other way towards the African coast, and something happened there that destroyed the connection. Quite feasibly, African elephants might have been their part of their Rome, and it was only lost because the landmass was lost.
Mm-hmm. We see the same thing in Australia as well, because Australia used to be connected to Indonesia with a land bridge, and then that was flooded because of sea rising. And that's why the Australian wildlife is so unique, because obviously it got cut off from the rest of the world. So it didn't have these influences in evolution that we see with the rest of the world. So that's why they have marsupials only in Australia, And we see a similar thing in Madagascar as well, because they've got very specific wildlife, like lemurs and stuff like that. And it's for the same reason that it's so cut off from the rest of the world, just by the fact there's a big ocean between it and Africa.
Okay.
I wonder if the Caribbean has, unlike Cuba, have like similar things, because they're relatively far off the coast, but you could quite feasibly imagine that at one point they were a landmass as well.
Yeah, perhaps. It's like South America and Africa used to be joined, and they drifted apart when the Atlantic formed, because the Atlantic is widening, so it started from the centre and it widened outwards in the centre of Africa, and it split Africa apart from South America. And we know this is true, one, because we know that the Atlantic is currently getting wider, and two, because fossils match between South America and Africa. So we can assume that they were joined at one point and they had the same wildlife in terms of dinosaur fossils.
So on that point, so what everything was everything connected as Pangaea? Was literally every continent? So South Africa, damn it, you've got me now. South America and Africa drifted apart. Was North America connected to Africa, or was that connected to Europe?
I'm not sure exactly.
Because I'm trying to think of which point is the Atlantic growing from. Is it from between South America and Africa, or is it between the four of Europe, Africa, North America, and South America?
So there's this thing called the Great Atlantic Ridge, which runs straight down the centre of the Atlantic Ocean. And it's basically a massive volcano underwater. And as it erupts, the material gets pushed outwards from the ridge. And that's what makes the ocean wider. So this ridge initially formed in the gap between Africa and South America, and possibly Europe and North America in the north.
Okay.
And it split the landmass in half, basically. But the point is that constantly the continents break apart and then come back together in cycles.
So Europe and Africa, have they moved away from each other?
I believe so. I'm not sure what the plate boundary is between them.
Okay, because I'm trying to think of, for the theory here that we're kind of debating, is that a volcanic event has happened and caused landmass to be lost and water to have engulfed this area between Malta and Africa, or Malta and Europe, whichever direction you want to head in. But it could, is that even possible?
I think in the case of Malta, because it's such a small landmass, it's more likely that an ocean rise would cut it off from Africa if it was ever joined to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what do you think of Malta as a theory?
Don't like it as much.
No.
But can see why
Yeah. And again, there's maybe more proof. Some of it's a bit too complicated for me to either understand or talk about. So, okay, so the third one, and I've got 6.
Okay.
Bit of spoilers, so I've got 6. The third one is the Bimini Islands in the Bahamas. So
quite a ways away.
Far off, but they built pyramids. The Egyptians. The chances are they might know about stuff that happened in South America and stuff like that. You never know. So in 1968, an underwater structure was found on the ocean floor around the Bimini Islands with stairs, I don't know, buildings, all that good stuff. It was actually found to be quite a large civilization that was found under the water.
Okay, interesting.
So in terms of going back to the whole water levels regularly accepted to be 100 to 300 foot lower, that's why they reckon it would have made a lot more sense. The rising of the water would have been the reason that Atlantis was swallowed by the sea.
Mm-hmm.
That's much stronger evidence, in my opinion. I think archaeological evidence for Atlantis is the best evidence you can look for. It's direct evidence of human activity and settlements.
Yes, but here is the issue. There is only proof of civilization found around 3000 BC, but not as far back as 10,000 BC, which is when Atlantis was said to have existed. But there is also speculation to say that maybe Plato didn't read the text right. So there is actually, skipping ahead to another theory, basically saying that there's an error suggested in Plato's writing where all the figures were multiplied by 10. So when it said it was 9,000 years ago, 9,200 years ago, it was meant to be 920 years ago. Which is a bit of a difference.
Yeah,
it's
just a bit.
It was about a year or 3 or 5,000 ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that hasn't been proven either way, but it's suggested. So that does actually apply to this. So
Yeah, I don't think we can rely too much on the timings given by such a dubious source as this hand-me-down Plato book. Well, two different books.
But as a credit to Plato, it was shown in his writings that he was actually one of the first people to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is true. He was one of the first people to realize that the Earth rotated around the sun and stuff like that.
Yeah, he was a clever guy, but
wasn't he a philosopher though, rather than a mathematician?
He was both a philosopher, but also
he was a
you could argue that,
though, wasn't he?
Yeah, but you could argue at the time philosophizing about the way that the planets and stuff worked was a philosophy, not necessarily maths at that time. Just having that different speculation of it wouldn't necessarily have been science at the time.
Yeah, he was a clever guy. He was doing a lot of stuff.
So the whole reason that people take, or a group of people take Atlantis quite seriously is because of the credibility of Plato, because it's very out of character for him to have made this up because of all the other stuff he wrote about.
Maybe. But, there's also the religious aspect to it, whereas, they followed all these Greek gods, and I assume he was religious. Most people were back then.
Yeah, but also don't forget...
Yeah, they would have been.
Before we had scientific understanding in our current knowledge, people would have just associated a celestial being doing all these things that they didn't understand, such as volcanoes and just in general the sea. They might not have understood why the tide worked, so they just presumed it was Poseidon.
Yeah.
In terms of the Greeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is that if Atlantis was an actual thing involved in their religion, then they would take it very seriously and assume it was a true phenomenon. And Plato would also assume it was real if it was involved in the religion. But I'm not sure if it was, so citation needed.
So apparently it was. One things I omitted, because I was going to save it for later, is that Zeus destroyed Atlantis.
Zeus, yes. Great guy.
Because he's the god of gods. And basically he was annoyed at the Atlanteans.
Yeah, he was annoyed at most people, to be honest. Basically, all he did was just rape women. That was Zeus's whole job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was a bit of a dick, to be honest.
Oh, one thing I forgot to mention about Malta as well, I'm pretty sure it was Malta when I was doing my research and I forgot to write it down, is that they actually, it's a bit of a stretch, but they found what could be carvings of a trident, obviously associated with Poseidon. And they could see it in some parts of the old temples, basically. It's a bit of a stretch, it could have been, but there is, I've seen pictures of the markings.
That could also be from the ancient Romans, though, right? Because Malta's literally off the coast of Sicily.
Yeah.
So that might be Roman influences at a later date as well, is what I'm trying to put forth there as an argument.
Well, the Romans were much later, right?
Yeah, true. When did you say that trident was found? Sorry, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about
recently.
Okay.
Yeah, recently when you might be able to go to Malta now and find these markings on some of the ruins.
Yeah, but that's not evidence of Atlantis. That's evidence of Poseidon, which was an actual god that they worshipped.
But Poseidon is heavily associated with Atlantis.
True.
So, should we go to the fourth one?
Yeah.
Antarctica.
What?
Antarctica. You heard right.
Did I? Can I say it again?
It's Atlantica.
Atlantica.
Oh, Atlantica. No. Is that what I said?
Yep.
Is that what I said? All right. No.
That's the episode title for tonight. Atlantica.
Atlantica. I meant Antarctica.
Okay, so what's the evidence that Antarctica was where Atlantis was located?
It explains itself. I'm going to leave it at that now. So Antarctica is considered, apparently, the number one favourite. Not necessarily the most credible, but one of the most looked into at the moment for the location of Atlantis.
Wow, okay.
So it was proven that Antarctica was not always covered in ice. They found evidence of a petrified forest and freshwater lakes underneath the ice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Antarctica is a continent. There is land beneath the ice.
Yes, yeah.
Unlike oh crap, what's the North?
The Arctic.
Yeah, unlike the Arctic,
yeah.
which
It's just a floating mass of water, isn't it?
there's
But
no land
apart
mass in
from
the
obviously
Arctic.
there is Greenland, but that's not technically considered the Arctic, right?
No, it's not.
Okay. So Antarctica is actually a landmass, right? So there's no specific proof to really back it up. It's just kind of speculation. There's no archaeologically. Jesus Christ, this episode.
Archaeological.
There's no archaeology to suggest evidence of concentric circles in landmass or structures.
Yeah.
But what they have seen is pyramid-like structures.
No, okay.
Kind of relating to the other thing. But they could be pyramids, or they could be mountains, basically. But there are land masses that do rise out of the ice.
Mm-hmm. But we're back to the time problem, where I don't think there's a time in human history where Antarctica didn't have ice on it.
Uh-huh.
I believe up to 10,000 years ago, Antarctica hasn't moved very much. It's always been in the south.
But has it always, within that time frame, has it always been frozen over?
Well, if it's located at the South Pole, yeah, it would be frozen over because it's very far from the equator.
Okay.
And this previous evidence of forests is probably from much older, probably back when
Pangaea.
Back when it was part of Pangaea, because it was north of Australia when it was part of Pangaea.
The other thing as well is that in order for reports to have indicated that the Antarctic was the source of Atlantis, how would Plato have got that information? Because, we're not talking.
Right, it's not about
Africa.
Plato getting the information. It's about the Egyptian sanctuary that gave the information to Solon.
Right.
And then passed it on.
Wait, how would?
So it's potentially a lot older.
Well, how would they know? Maybe in reference to episode 4.
Oh God.
they were able to communicate a lot easier through the use of their obelisks and their pyramids. little plug there. No, I don't really think Antarctica's that thing, but I don't disbelieve that there could be something underneath all that ice.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. Part of me, in a really horrible way, would love for the Antarctic to completely melt to find out what's under there, because it's a complete mystery.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably lots under there. There's probably woolly mammoths. Mammoths. That's a really hard word to say.
Yeah.
There's probably all sorts under there. And there'll probably be other historical stories like Atlantis that you'd be able to address by findings that were actually there.
Yeah.
Because it's just a mystery.
I'm not sure you'd find any human evidence in Antarctica, really. You'd probably find dinosaur fossils, like an old fossils like that, but probably not mammoths because they tended to be northern and they're fairly recent creatures.
Okay. What about sharks?
The land sharks.
Land sharks.
The street sharks, they call them. They came from the late 90s. No? No one knows what I'm on about?
No.
There was a terrible show called Street Sharks in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
I still don't know what you're talking about.
They were cartoon sharks which swam through the concrete.
They had tattoos and stuff like that.
Yeah, they were
and
pretty,
you
pretty
could get
gangster.
Figurines of them and stuff like that, yeah. I've seen someone with a street shark. One of our friends, actually.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Should we get on to the 5th one?
Sure, yeah.
So this one is, in my opinion, I really like the Rickard structure one, the Eye of the Sahara one. But this
I do as well.
This has been going on for a while, and there's maybe a bit more evidence to support it, because the Eye of Rickard is way more recent. So basically, it's in Greece, which makes sense, because that's where it should be, in theory, because that's why they'd know about it. On the island of Thera, which is now known as Santorini.
Okay.
Basically, Santorini is a dormant volcano, and it had erupted in 1456 BC. It erupted in one of the largest eruptions ever. 18 cubic kilometers of magma over a couple of days. And then this lines up with bits in the Bible, apparently. It was like the 3 days of darkness or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually related to this, apparently. That's what they're associating it with.
Yep. There was in like medieval Britain, there's a documented case of, I think it was an Icelandic volcano erupting and there being darkness for like a couple of days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's quite a common occurrence actually throughout history of people being plunged into darkness and then not knowing what the fuck is happening.
So basically, if you actually look at... Let's all do it now, just so you know what I'm on.
Okay.
If you Google Santorini...
Yeah, I actually know this because I'm currently playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Oh, Odyssey, yeah. So if you actually just literally Google Santorini, but then look at it's an island in the Aegean Sea, but if you look at like the top-down map of it, you can see it's kind of like moon-shaped, almost like it could be a circle.
Oh yeah, this is a volcano.
With a landmass in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're trying to say is that the volcano destroyed the city, but it did used to be Atlantis. Like the island used to be Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the max length is 18 kilometers. The sea level's risen since then. So it could have been a lot more landmass than it appears now.
Yep.
And obviously after you'd think there'd be more landmass after the volcano, so we don't 100% know
so
that. But
it's a caldera, this area.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that means that it was a volcano originally, and it emptied pretty much all of its chamber, its magma chamber of material, and then
that
it collapsed under the weight because there was a big void space left in the ground.
Yep.
And that's why you get this big circular structure with the center dome in the middle, which would have been the original magma dome.
Yeah.
But it's obviously collapsed since.
Okay. So go into a bit more detail then. You could quite easily speculate that the center bit could have been the center.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense that would fresh water be associated with a volcano?
Yeah. Volcanoes are aquifers. There's lots of fresh water associated with them.
I love that word.
Aquifer. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is associated with Plato's writing of them having a pure water source at the center of the city.
Mm-hmm.
What else? There's, like we said about Greece having a lot of white rocks, there's a lot of black rock because obviously it's a volcano, and there is apparently red rock as well. And I can actually see there is it's called the Red Beach, and it's just a rocky beach surrounded by red rock.
Mm-hmm.
And I did actually see a video as well of a volcanologist.
Yes.
Who specifies in Santorini, and he's looked into all of it. Basically, there's loads of landmass because there was that much magma that was spewed out, and they can date back how far it went and stuff like that. That's how they were able to work it out. Also, there was carbon dating from a throne that was excavated that said the throne was as far back as 1456 BC.
That makes sense though, because the people that inhabited. So this is probably factually inaccurate, but from my experience of playing Assassin's Creed, southern Greece, so where Knossos or Knossos, however you say it, and Minoa are based, which is now Crete. That was where ancient Minoans came from.
Yeah, Minoans are from Santorini. Yeah.
Yeah, and they used to inhabit the southern parts and used to have territory on there. Obviously, then from a civilization perspective, it puts a different spin on it because I don't know whether or not the Minoans had the same religious civilization kind of experience, whether or not they believed in Poseidon, whether or not they had advanced thinkers, whether or not there was evidence that was collated later by Plato up from a different dynasty that would have added to evidence about it being the concentric rings, about it being circular in shape. Like that all ties in again with how Santorini looks from top down, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. God bless Assassin's Creed, because the amount of crap you just spewed then has to be from the game.
Yeah, it's a pretty good game.
Which is good. It's relevant that you're playing it at the moment, actually. It's good timing.
Yeah, it must be true. I mean, there's giants in the game, right? And centaurs and mythology stuff. And they were all clearly a thing that was real, so...
Are giants and centaurs in Assassin's Creed? I don't know if I missed the game.
Maybe.
I don't think so.
He's lying again, he's lying. I just agreed because I wasn't listening.
But in terms of like hard evidence, there isn't really anything. It's mostly just the fact that it's nearby to the area of Greece, and there was people around there at the right time, from what I understand.
So I haven't got to the next bit.
Okay,
there's a bit on the south part of the island called Akrotiri, which is that they've excavated ruins of a prehistoric village.
Ooh.
Excavations found that could be considered advanced, and you can see that stuff like, I thought it was quite a not really important point that they made, but the more I think about it, the more it is. The fact that the roads, for example, weren't really, really tight. They were actually quite open, which suggested that they actually used roads. It wasn't just gaps between houses. Sewage systems, they were like 3-story buildings as well, which it shows good architecture. I'm trying to remember a lot of the stuff they talked about. It was really interesting.
They had pipes with running water and water closets found. The pipes run in twin systems, indicating that the Therians used both hot and cold water supplies. The origin of the hot water probably being geothermic, given the volcano's proximity.
Wow, that's insane.
That's cool.
I didn't know that. So, yeah, it fits in with the whole way more advanced civilization than they should have for that time. I mean, that's a perfect example of it, really. This is what I mean. It's actually backed up with actual excavations that fit the description. That's why this is considered really good. There's also another guy, which I do want to apologize as well for not writing down the names of the people because I didn't think they were important. But if I host next time, I will actually, because it's relevant for the people who actually discovered these places, I think.
Yeah, give them some credit.
Just for people can look at. Yeah, exactly. But there's basically a guy who's he considers himself quite, what's the word? Like maybe not Leonardo da Vinci as such, but who is someone who's been considered mad in the past, but their theories and their findings have ended up actually
Galileo.
being true. Galileo, perfect. Right, so he considers himself like a modern-day Galileo kind of thing. He believes that Atlantis is in Santorini, or around Santorini, and he wants to do dives and expeditions to the surrounding waters, but the Greek government won't let him do it because they don't believe him to be a madman.
Come on, Greece. This is why you're in debt.
If you have Atlantis, I mean, come on.
What if he pays to do it? They need the money,
He's
right?
already put a lot of time and money into it, but they wouldn't allow him to do it.
Oh, you suck, Greece. Come on.
No, they know something, don't they?
It's a cover up.
Maybe.
It's a cover up.
They're hiding
Since
the technology.
that source, they might have allowed him to do it since, but I haven't seen anything from the same guy that said that he's actually been able to do stuff. He basically said
I also feel like I also feel like if they discovered Atlantis, it may have come on the news.
Yeah.
No, they cover it up. It's made of gold, did you know?
So what do you think of this one then?
I like this one. This is cool.
I like it. Yeah, I do like
I think
it.
it's quite likely. I don't think Atlantis existed, but if it had to, then this is a likely source for it.
So you don't think Atlantis existed?
No, I don't think it exists at all.
I do, because in Assassin's Creed, it's exactly where we're talking about now.
Oh, right, okay.
Atlantis is in Santorini.
Exactly. It's on Thera in the game.
Okay. Fair enough.
Spoiler alert.
Okay.
Should have said that first.
One thing we haven't talked about is tsunamis and the fact that tsunamis could destroy a city. And that would require either earthquake activity or a large eruption, because an eruption could cause a landslide into the ocean if you had an oceanic volcano. And things like that have happened in the past. But the problem with that is that tsunamis don't tend to be that large, but they tend to come in waves. So you get multiple tsunamis coming in one after another and they push into the land, but the waves themselves aren't that high. So they don't have as much destructive power as you'd think to destroy an entire city. But they're prolonged events, so you get them over multiple days.
Would it also depend on the proximity to the volcano, though?
It would, yeah.
So say, for example, we were talking about the Malta one. So Greece is not far from Malta.
Yeah.
Could that be enough explanation for why some of the land mass of Malta would be lost? Or it's not a permanent sea rise, though, is it? Or is it because of land mass being created by the volcano?
Well, you wouldn't have much of a sea rise. You'd have a local sea rise a little bit if you had a large landslide into the ocean. But the thing is with tsunamis as well is that they recede after they're done.
Okay.
So you'd have a short period of time where you'd have a local sea rise, which would spill into the land, and then it would eventually recede back into the ocean.
Okay.
And that's what we saw, for example, in like the 2004 Boxing Day tsunamis.
Yeah.
Where we had these constant multiple waves of tsunamis across the Indonesia in that area.
Yeah,
and then
it was
they
three
eventually,
different ones, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then they eventually receded back into the ocean after doing their thing.
And
the waves themselves weren't that large. They were only maybe single-story buildings, which seems quite large, but they're not like these super tsunamis, mega tsunamis that you think of that these like extreme documentaries sort of make up, where you have hundreds of feet tall waves. Like, that can't happen in real life. It's not accurate at all.
I guess it would take far too much landmass to trigger that kind of size wave.
Yeah, it's just some fear-mongering.
Yeah. There's actually a really good film called The Impossible, which is about the 2004 tsunami, which is really good. And that displays it exactly how you've said it, Alex. The wave is pretty high, let's be honest, but it hits the ground with so much force that it basically destroys things that aren't tied down. Most of the big structures don't, like entire hotels don't just collapse because of the water. It's little things that are maybe glass walled or thin walled that just get wiped away, and then it just leaves all the debris. As the water goes back out, it's just literally scattered debris everywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll move a small car, but nothing larger than that, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to talk about tsunamis for a bit.
Oh, that's cool.
So next one, what are we up to? 4?
So
5?
before I go on to the next one, I just want to make a few honourable mentions.
Nice.
But basically, there's other stuff that I won't go into too much detail, but I didn't feel like they were compelling enough, basically. So one of the main theories that I didn't really discuss is, because it's quite broad, is that they believe it to just be in the Atlantic Ocean somewhere, because it kind of makes sense that it's called Atlantis, it's in the Atlantic Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But there's a few places it kind of specifies. One of them suggests the Azores, like we discussed in the first episode.
With the Mary Celeste.
Exactly, yeah. Another one is saying that it's in the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Did that come up? Because like it's just got such a big history about things going missing. So why couldn't an entire civilization go missing?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was aliens. They abducted the civilization.
Yeah, I tried to stay away from aliens this time, okay? I don't want to make it my thing.
But they're a cornerstone of the podcast. They need to come up.
I mean, it could be. I'm
Could be.
not arguing with that.
There's just as much evidence that it didn't happen than it did.
Yeah. Oh, one that I maybe should have looked into is that some people believe it's in the North Sea, as in around Scandinavia and Britain.
Oh, okay.
Because if you look at when the water level was lower, Britain used to be connected to Europe. Yeah. So it's saying that Atlantis used to be around there, basically.
Pre-Brexit.
Yeah.
Atlantis existed pre-Brexit.
Exactly, yeah.
Fucking hell, this is the second time we've Brexit. That was a hard Brexit when you disconnect yourself from Europe geographically. Pun.
Do you reckon the Atlanteans voted to leave? And once we actually do leave the EU, they'll come back with all their amazing technology.
And then Zeus punished them because they were like, no, you fucking idiots. Like, we just destroy your city. And then, but that, again, is quite a loose claim.
Yeah.
So my sixth theory, I feel like it's a good way to finish it off because it's the theory that Plato intended it to be a myth.
Yeah, this is what I was gonna ask at the end.
Basically saying that because he was a philosopher, did he just put Atlantis down, the story of Atlantis down, to teach a lesson? Because he discusses a lot about how Zeus destroyed Atlantis because they became very greedy or avaricious, and they had everything, and then they just started to do what humans do, basically. So did it exist at all?
So the thing that makes me wonder this most, and I was going to ask it the whole way through and have just double checked it to make sure I'm not saying this wrong. So Plato was a follower of Socrates.
Yep.
Who basically spent his entire time in ancient Greece going, well, what if it's not? And just challenging everything and being like, but what have you thought about this?
What a dick.
Just asking why constantly and putting people in the situation where they're like, do you intervene or do you not? For example, he'd pose questions like, is it right to kill somebody who has killed somebody else? So like the death penalty. And he posed questions like that. A big part of that was that because he questioned and challenged everything and basically philosophically asked, what role should we be playing in certain aspects of general life and crime and punishment and thinking and mythology? People did used to A, embellish the stories, and B, falsify some of the stories so that they were more playworthy, because some of the then followers of Socrates started to become playwrights. And they would make extravagant plays posing these sort of philosophical questions. And you could quite easily imagine that Plato could have jumped on an idea posed by somebody else and turned it into this play and said, well, what happens if this amazing city of Atlantis existed and then was lost? So that people would think about it as a conundrum. And it's all just spiraled from there. And like going back to what you said, it could be that documents are falsified. Are these errors about timings? Are they actually just rubbish because he's made them up? Is that why they're factual errors or typing errors or mistranslations maybe from, I don't know, whatever language it might have been that these came from originally, maybe Greek or whatever?
Well, it might be the other way around in the fact that it was originally created as a story with a moral, and then Plato took it and thought it was an actual thing.
Yeah, true.
Assumed it was destroyed because it's currently not around.
Because it's almost like a fable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a story with a moral that has a learning point from it, which is don't piss off the gods or we'll flood you.
So one thing I just want to, the bit that I've tagged on is a quote. It was off when I was doing the Malta stuff, it was actually off the Malta Atlantis, whatever, website. So the quote is, "It is as well that Atlantis should remain a mystery. It is right that man, looking at the ocean, should worry thinking of a distant and inscrutable realm swallowed up in one day and one night by the sea and fire. The proud dream of an eternity shattered by nature's reawakening. Civilizations are born, grow, and finally die. Let us prepare ourselves for this. Atlantis never existed. It is everywhere."
We are Atlantis.
Basically saying, that we should...
You're Atlantis.
Atlantis is the whole point of Atlantis is that it's a theory, like the representation of maybe we should appreciate what we got because it could fucking happen that we lose all of it.
It could get hit by a tsunami and be destroyed instantly.
Yeah, maybe prepare yourself for the worst, and which is obviously our civilization in most areas of high risk have started doing that. You know, in terms of practically, I believe that we're doing it. Maybe philosophically, we don't do it as humans and appreciate what we got and stuff like that. Which, as a philosopher, he's going to make you think like that. And I really, really like that quote. I don't know if it's a modern quote. All it said is that, and as a famous writer once said...
And that writer's name? William Shatner.
James Woods.
It's from Star Trek.
One thing I've just realised as well that really pisses me off is Atlantica is from Little Mermaid, isn't it? Yeah. Atlantica's Little Mermaid. That's why I'm getting confused because I played Kingdom Hearts recently.
One of the things I was going to ask, which is how much does the story of the Little Mermaid take from Atlantis?
Well, he is Poseidon, isn't he?
He's Triton, isn't he?
Triton. Yeah. But he's basically Poseidon.
Well, that's the thing. But
it's an underwater city.
He's a merman, isn't he?
Yeah.
And so is Ariel.
Well, thing is, even that's born from like...
Well, the original Little Mermaid story is very dark.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very depressing.
They're all,
from the Brothers Grimm, is it? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if it's Grimm. I don't think it is. I might be
But
wrong.
it's along those lines. It's like a really old, dark, teach your kids a lesson kind of thing.
Basically, the original story goes that she gets the power to walk on land with human legs, but every time she takes a step,
It's excruciating.
daggers dig into the bottom of her feet.
Yeah.
But she toughs it out because she wants to marry the prince. And then some bad stuff happens.
Just get a wheelchair.
And then she turns into sea foam and dies.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the
really
story.
dark.
It just ends like that. She just dies.
Yeah, it's Hans Christian Andersen.
That's the one, yeah.
So Triton in that is the son of Poseidon.
Ah.
Oh, yeah.
So it is
Give
really...
it some context. Because that's the only other thing is, where is the Little Mermaid set? Because that's probably indisputable proof.
Yeah, it must be.
It took me a split second longer to realize that. Oh wait, no.
The sarcasm.
Yeah, it's been a long episode. So I feel like that's a good bit to wrap it up and start giving our own opinions and stuff. My opinion, like with a lot of these theories, actually, is maybe not the Jack Ripper and the fucking, the JFK assassination. When I say that I kind of want it to be true. You know what I mean? So when it comes to like the ghost ship stuff and especially the Beatles thing, it's something really interesting. You kind of want it to be like, oh yeah. And the same with the pyramid stuff. I know I got quite invested in that, and it's the idea of Atlantis is really cool, and that's why it's so prominent in pop culture and stuff like that, because so much stuff has been born from it because it's so shapeable into something really cool. But then also the idea of, I believe it's quite possible that there is a city that was swallowed up by the sea naturally because of the sea rising. Or just it was destroyed because of an earthquake it specifies that it was swallowed up by the sea. But was it Mount Vesuvius when that exploded? The city of, begins with a P.
Pompeii, do you mean?
Pompeii, yeah. It's possible for natural disasters, very, very possible for natural disasters to destroy a civilization.
Yeah.
And considering civilizations back then used to be smaller.
Yeah, especially way back then when they were smaller and they had less knowledge of natural disasters. And
how to prevent them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Most importantly, though, they didn't have earthquake insurance.
Don't you think, would you? Do you have volcano insurance? No? Well, when was the last time we had a volcano? We haven't really. Don't you think, would you? I love
Family Guy just has a quote for everything.
It's so great. So great. So going back to my opinion on it. So I'd like it to be true, and I think it could be true, but also I really also like the idea that he wrote it, and it hit so many people, obviously, because it has. It's quite a famous story. It's very famous, in fact. It's why I put it down as a theory, because I was going to do 5, and then I added that on the end, because I was just like, I feel like it just hit me quite well. The idea that he did it, not to be a dick, but just kind of teaches a lesson and say, look, appreciate what you've got, because it could be gone. Stu, what do you think?
I like the Santorini one, the island of Thera, kind of folding in on itself and destroying itself. It's really interesting. One of the things that we've not really touched on as a theory was why the civilization is often quite prominent in history. But I think the more interesting part is the fact that it's just the location is gone, isn't it? So,
what do you mean in terms of the civilization is prominent?
Well, there's lots of like Alex said before, whether or not he was joking or not. Like, there's rumors of technology being there. There's rumors of it being a very advanced civilization.
Well, that's what Plato said.
Yeah,
it's about that, and then it got wiped out just because it got swallowed by the sea.
Like, if that sort of thing is thought to be true, you'd expect to see some evidence of it, and none of the bits that we've talked about brought up any obvious archaeological evidence of
I disagree.
Advanced technology.
Akrotiri and Santorini, they found potential evidence of hot and cold water piping. Like that. Don't forget, when Plato wrote this, that would be really considered. Because obviously when we think of an advanced civilization, we think fucking aliens, we think...
Well, yeah, we're thinking electricity.
Electronic pyramids. And
yeah.
You know what I mean? So I interpret what Plato was saying relative to him, because just saying like, oh, they had roads. I don't know if the Greeks had roads, because I know it was a Roman thing. So did Greeks have roads? I don't know. Did they have sewage? Did they have?
No, I don't think so.
You know what I mean? So
they didn't have sewage.
Of Akrotiri in the island of Thera or Santorini, that they have found proof, like Alex said.
Yeah, I like that theory the most.
But I feel like I should not have done the Eye of the Sahara one first, because like I said, that's my favourite, because you've actually got a visual representation of the actual city.
Yeah, but the reason that I think I'm drawn less to that one is the lack of evidence of an active civilization on it.
Yeah.
That's the main thing for me. I'm sure if you were to look at it in enough depth and you were to build a time machine and go back, you'd find that's exactly where Atlantis was. But we don't have that, so we can't.
So, Alex?
Yeah, I find it really cool how accurate the Rickard structure lines up to Plato's description.
Yeah, that's me as well.
It looks just how I pictured it when you were describing his description. It's super cool, actually. It's also really cool, just
regardless of the Atlantis thing, it's still really interesting. And the fact that it actually looks like an eye, because of the mountainous area above it, it's amazing.
So if I actually had to pick a place that Atlantis could have been, I think the Santorini example is probably the most likely.
It's the one that's backed up the most, yeah.
Yeah, it's got evidence of a civilization around the right time period. It's got some evidence of advanced technology with those pipes, which I think is actually really cool.
It is really cool.
Geothermal water theory. And it's in the right area that you'd expect it to be, like around the Mediterranean, Greece area. Especially if Plato was commenting on it, you'd expect it to be quite close to Greece. Because I imagine they didn't travel that far out from the area with their technology. Like, they definitely weren't going to like America and stuff like that, because America hadn't been discovered. But ultimately, I think I line up with the last theory in the fact that it's not actually real, and it was designed to be a story from the start.
Yeah.
With a moral.
It's weird because like I said, it doesn't line up with Plato's kind of pattern, because he wrote about stuff mostly, again, people please prove me to be wrong. But like from the sources I looked into, he basically only wrote about stuff that was actually relevant.
Like actually real.
Yeah, and stuff that was actually proven to be true, like the whole Earth not being round, flat. Freudian slip. So yeah,
it's definitely the squid.
He pulled the landmass down with his giant tentacles. And drowned the whole people. So I think it's quite interesting that we all have different opinions on this, because Stuart seems to think it existed and it was in Santorini. I think it didn't exist and it was probably a story. And Sean wants to believe that it existed and it was probably in Santorini.
So I have a Santorini, but my favourite is the Rickard structure one.
The Rickard structure, yeah. Got a nice balanced viewpoint.
Which makes a change, I guess. Usually we're quite unanimous in what we agree with.
I think that's just because of the lack of evidence that it allows such a broad range of opinions on it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's... this is what I was going to say. I just want to put a little end disclaimer as well. For anyone who wants to comment and tell me what I've missed, because I can almost guarantee there's another big theory that for some reason I didn't pick up on. I've watched quite a few videos, I've looked at quite a few different websites, but I've got a feeling there will be something. I'd like to think I've got the main ones, like looking at the Wikipedia and stuff. Even like the Rickard structure one and the Santorini one, on the Wikipedia, they're quite lackluster, to be honest. There's not a lot of information, so I don't know what people consider to be their favourite. So it would be great if people could basically let us know what they think, and if there's any theories in particular, or, you know, of speculation of where it's been proven or whatever the Atlantis is. It'd be great to hear from everyone.
You've done it now, you're going to regret this.
No, I
You've challenged the internet to tell you what you've done wrong.
I want to be proven wrong.
Incoming 12-page article on why you suck and you shouldn't lead episodes on this podcast.
And get rid of the comment section.
just delete it. Just nuke it from orbit.
Yeah. I'm afraid we've closed down our social media today.
It's a wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just before we end, I'd like to thank 1000 Whispering for their comments on the last episode. If you want to be featured in the next episode, please leave a comment or review on the website of your choice. We are currently available on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify and YouTube. All the links are available on Twitter at Roam Podcast, that's ROAM Podcast. Thank you for listening and we'll see you next time.
Bye!